Okay. At the end of this week's parasha, ותדבר מרים ואהרון במשה על אודות האישה הכושית אשר לקח, כי אישה כושית לקח. So Miriam and Aharon spoke במשה, seemingly about Moshe, on the fact that he took an isha kushit. Kusha kushit literally means a black woman. Ki isha kushit lakach, because he took a black woman. Vayomeru, and they said, Harak ach b'Moshe diber Hashem. Does God only speak to Moshe? Haro gam banu diber. He also speaks to us. We're also Nevi'im. Vayishma Hashem. And Hashem heard their conversation.
Who's speaking?
Pasuk says Miriam and Aharon were speaking about Moshe's wife, that she took Isha Kushit. And a simple pshat level, what does it mean Kushit? She was from Midian. She was from Midian. Midian, a dark-skinned woman. What? Daughter of Yitro, Tzipora, it's from Midian. Kushit.
Big lips.
Kushit little means black. Kushi, right? But most Mefarshim learn it. Kushit means actually beautiful. As a Lashon Sagi Nahor. And some say the gematria of Kushit is Yefetoar, means beautiful, right? But it was a euphemism for she's really beautiful, meaning her midot are perfect, right? And even though she's perfect, they were saying, because if they're speaking derogatory, the next pasuk doesn't make sense. That Hashem only speaks to Moshe. He also speaks to us. Meaning what they're saying is, he's separated from his wife. Why did he separate from his wife? Because he's a Navi. So Miriam says to Aharon, oh, we're also Naviim, and we didn't separate from our wives. Vayishma Hashem, and Hashem heard. The pasuk says, "V'ha'ish Moshe anav meod mikol ha'adam asher penei adama." And Moshe was the most humblest person that ever existed. Now, the question is, what is the connection? So this Aharon and Miriam having a conversation. They speak about Moshe saying, we're also Nevi'im, and he's a Navi. So why did he separate from his wife? We don't have to separate from our wives. And Hashem hears, and the next pasuk tells me what? Moshe is very anav. That's great. Why are you telling me this here now? Right? We'll leave that question aside for a second. Vayomer Hashem pit'om el Moshe ve'Aaron. So pit'om means what? What does pit'om mean? Suddenly. Right? Pit'om. He comes to Moshe Aaron, ve'el Miriam. Tzeu shloshtam. Pit'om. Suddenly Hashem appears to all three of them with no advance warning. Usually in Nevuah, Moshe Rabbeinu can do this, but usually Aharon and Miriam, they had to put themselves in the state of Nevuah, go into a trance, meditate to get Nevuah. This time, Pitom, Hashem appears to them. Go outside, Lohel Moed, vayetzu shloshtam. Why Pitom? Because the Midrash says that Aharon and Miriam at that point were having actual relations. They wanted to show them, right, that it's not so simple that Navish can remain with his wife. Because Hashem appeared to him at that moment, Pitom, suddenly. Right? We'll see in a second. Vayed Hashem b'amud anan. Hashem came down in a cloud of glory. Vayamod petach ha'ohel. And he stood at the entrance of the Mishkan. Vayikra Aharon Miriam vayotzu shanehem. And he calls out to Aharon and Miriam, and they both go out. Vayomeru vayomer shimuna devarai. And Hashem says, I want you to hear my words. If you're going to have a nevuah from Hashem, you see it with a vision. I speak to you in a dream. Moshe. That's not Moshe. He's Ne'eman, he's trustworthy in my whole house. We'll have to see what those words mean. They don't seem to have any relationship to anything. What, I don't mean not Ne'eman, only Moshe is Ne'eman. We'll see what that means. But what he says is, I don't speak to Moshe like I speak to you. You is a vision. You is a mar'eh, is a chalom, and a dream. I speak to him face to face. Mar'eh v'lo bechidot. Utmonat Hashem yabit. My relationship with Moshe is fundamentally this. And the nevuah that Moshe experiences, nobody else in the history of the world will ever experience. Like we're having a conversation, Hashem Moshe had a conversation any time of day, any point at night. 24/7, Hashem was connected to Hashem, plugged in. All Nevi'im have to only see Hashem in a sort of vision. They have to go into a dream. They have to go into a trance meditation to reach the level of Nevuah. So they can prepare themselves for it. Moshe is 24/7 prepared. That's why Moshe cannot be married. It's unique to Moshe because he's always connected to Nevuah. Aharon and Miriam, you're not like that. And he showed them by coming to them pitom in that time to show them what Moshe experiences on a constant basis. Right? That's the story. And he says to them, right, Moshe is different. And therefore, he was right for separating from his wife. And immediately afterwards, what happens? Hashem gets angry and leaves to show his displeasure with them. And as soon as the Anan sar ma'al ha'ohel, the cloud of glory separates from the Ohel, from the Mishkan, Miriam is a Metzorah. Because she's the one that started the conversation with Aharon. That's what it says here. Okay. What did Miriam say? What did Miriam say? Oh, what Miriam said was, you have a beautiful wife, Bidot character inside the house is one of the holiest Jewish women in the Jewish nation. We're also Nevi'im. Why are you separating with your wife? It's a little sister. It's a big sister giving a little tochecha to her younger brother. You know. Now, I want to go a step further. The Ramban says something fascinating. The Ramban brings the Mechilta, brings the Sifri. Midrash is bothered because we discuss, right? What does it mean? The Pasuk says, you know, we're also Nevi'im. Only Moshe is a Navi. And that's what all she says, right? And immediately what does the Pasuk say? Moshe zana mikol ha'adama asher al panei ha'adama. What does that have to do with what Miriam just said? So Ramban brings a midrash. The Rambam says, I can find the Ramban for you, if not I'll read to you outside. Aval b'sifri, he quotes the Sifri. Ramban says, Rabbi Natan Omer, Av befanav shel Moshe dibru bo. They actually were speaking in front of Moshe. It wasn't behind Moshe's back. They were speaking in front of Moshe. Shenemar, vayishma Hashem. And then immediately it says, V'ha'ish Moshe anav meod. Moshe was very humble. Which means Moshe was standing there. Why does the Pasuk tell me he's humble? Ela shekavash Moshe radavar. He held himself back. He didn't respond. Right? Yaskir anuvotov. Why is he mentioning his humility? Shesalvar velo anam. He took the rebuke from Miriam. He took the rebuke, accepted the rebuke, and didn't answer them. Hashem kanalo. But Hashem answered for him. Hashem had kanaud, responded on behalf of Moshe because of his humility. He didn't respond to his older sister. Now, let me ask you a question. Yeah. So what Rabbi Natan Sifri points out clearly is what happened. It wasn't that Miriam behind Moshe's back is talking to Aharon and saying, "Look at my brother Moshe here. He separates from his wife, keeps her miserable. What could he do such a thing?" Right? No, that's not what happened. The Sifri says it was in front of Moshe, which means that an older sister is saying to her younger brother, asking a question: "Why did you separate from your wife?" Right? We're also Nevi'im. A little rebuke. Look, you have a wonderful wife here. Why are you separating from her? Right? Seemingly giving tochecha. Now, before you get to your question, in the laws of Lashon Hara, everybody in the world agrees that only Lashon Hara is behind somebody's back. If I'm having a conversation with you and I say something about you, right? Even if it's negative, since you can respond, it's not Lashon Hara. Lashon Hara is only behind your back. When I'm having a conversation with you, no matter what I say, it may be other things. It may be onat dvarim. It may be all kinds of other isurim. But Lashon Hara is not. Now here, number one, there was no gnut. There was nothing derogatory. It was seeming like tochecha, a rebuke. Moshe, why are you separating from your wife? Asking you a question, it's kind of, we're also Nevi'im. We don't separate from our wives. There's a mitzvah to be married. Why in the world are you separating? Right? She's trying to understand him. Right? And she's giving a little tochecha. in front of him, directly to his face. Nega, she becomes a metzorat. And from here we learn all the laws of Lashon Hara. Right, from here we learned. His mitzvah, zachor, b'shekara lebinyan. Right, we have to remember what happened with Miriam. Remember, don't do psi Lashon Hara. It wasn't even Lashon Hara here. How is this the source for Lashon Hara when this itself wasn't Lashon Hara? You hear the question?
I do.
But you have a comment.
Yeah.
Okay, let me hear.
The concern is that the Pasuk said that she's talking to Aaron.
Yeah.
She and Aaron are having a conversation. So whether Moshe's there or not. So Moshe's there because he's an Ish Hanava. So, and he doesn't respond. Hashem responds.
But look at the words, the nuance of the words. Latdaber Miriam ve'Aharon beMoshe. Aharon and Miriam, there was dibur beMoshe. Be'Moshe means literally in Moshe. Right? Be'Moshe means literally in Moshe, which means we have to translate loosely about Moshe. Right? Right? Vayomeru. But this is what they said. It says Vatdaber vayomeru. It's interesting. So exactly what is the dibur? What is the amira? What are these two things? But we were speaking Moshe about Moshe regarding his wife. But what did they actually say? Vayomeru. What they said. Harag Moshe diber Hashem. That Hashem only speaks to Moshe. Hashem also speaks to us. Merely, that's the words they're saying to Moshe according to the Sifri. Moshe, Hashem only speaks to you. He also speaks to us. The hint is what? Why did you separate from your wife? And we don't have to.
Yeah, are you much greater than we are?
Yeah.
So on the one hand, Aharon is complicit in this. Where's his nega?
Good. You're asking another question. So it was initiated by Miriam. But clearly, at least the way the Sifri learns it, and others, it was in front of Moshe. So if that's the case, what's the Lashon Hara here? And that's how he learns. That's why he tells Moshe was Anav. Why was he Anav? Because he didn't respond. Otherwise, why are you telling me here of all places he's an Anav? I mean, we know other places he's an Anav. Right? That's how the Sifri learns it. Others learn differently, but that's how the Sifri learns it. Right? The Sifri learns it. No, not necessarily. Torah gives him he wasn't going to fight with his sister. Good. He took kibel. He received it. Oh, so let's not get stuck on this because we have a lot to cover.
Okay, I
but
was just going to say,
yeah,
we shouldn't be involved in a man and his wife's relationship, even a sister or brother. So that bothers me.
Again, what seems like they understood the reason why he separated from her was not because they're having marital strife, that you shouldn't be involved. The reason why he separated is because he's a higher level of Navi. And she's saying, we're also Naviim. That's not a reason to separate. Right? That's what she seems to be saying to Moshe. Okay. Let's look at a Rambam. This is a fascinating Rambam. Yeah, you with me, Ben? Oh. יורם, אתה איתי יורם?
כן הרב, אני פה כבוד הרב. מנסה למצוא את הקשר, קצת איחרתי מחילה.
כן, ודאי. זה תוכחה, קצת. לא. We'll see in a second. We'll see. Look at the Rambam. So the Rambam in the Chot Tumat Tzarat, right? Not often that we learn the Rambam in Chot Tumat Tzarat, right? Baruch Hashem is not Nogea today, or not Baruch Hashem. If it would be Nogea today, that means we're in a high spiritual level, but it doesn't apply today. But look at the Rambam writes. So Rambam tells you the way Negaim work. And he says, first, the person speaks Lashon Hara. It first begins with the house. If he does the Shuvah, the house becomes pure. If not, we end up breaking down the house. And if he still doesn't do the Shuvah, then he goes to his clothing. And if he doesn't do the Shuvah, then his clothing are full of Negaim, he's got to get rid of the clothing. Finally, we start with the house, doesn't get the message. Clothing doesn't get the message, then he gets the Nega on his person. Right? If you still don't get it, and then you're out of the camp, separated from people, you obviously, you got to remove yourself from the world to finally get it, that you can't be around people. Right? That's the Rambam tells you chronology of how it happens. But then he says like this. On this, the Torah warns and says, Hishamer benega hatzarat. Be careful from Nega. Zechor et asher asa Hashem Elokecha leMiriam baderech. Remember what Hashem did to Miriam on the road when they were traveling. Now, Hare Omer, Hidbodenu. Pasuk saying, think about. Ma ira leMiriam hanivia. What happened with Miriam hanivia? Shedibra be'acheha. She spoke about her brother. She gedola mimenu. She's older, an older sister. Beshanim, years. Ve'gidla oto al bikeha. She raised him on her lap. She was the big sister taking care of her little brother. She's 6 years older than him. Ve'sikna be'atzma lehatzilo min hayam. And she put her life in danger to save him. Right? When the parents gave up on him. She didn't. And she put her life in danger to make sure that he survives. So Miriam, whose best interest at heart here? Moshe. She's not here to put him down, chas v'shalom. Her little brother, she saved him, raised him. She's older than him. She's a big sister to looking out for a little brother. And heaven forbid, nothing derogatory was said about Moshe. She made a small mistake. She compared him to other prophets. That's really her mistake. And he wasn't even makpid about it. He didn't get upset. Right? Moshe didn't get upset about it. He heard his sister. She's where he's coming from. If she was correct in her understanding, she had a legitimate tana, or she happened to be wrong. But he didn't get upset. And even so, she got tzarat. Now Rambam says, if that's Miriam, who she made a little mistake in understanding, gets tzarat, for sure, regular people who are tipshim, who are fools. Shemarbim, look at the words of the Rambam though. Shemarbim ledaber gedolot v'niflaot. They speak. Marbim ledaber. They don't shut up for a second. They just talk and talk and talk, right? Gedolot v'niflaot, right? All these great ideas. Now here the Rambam is not talking about even speaking Lashon Hara. He's talking about speaking in general. Speak too much. Person who wants to mechaven orchotav, to keep his life in a straight path. People that sit around and just schmooze nonsense, don't sit with them. People shouldn't be snared, right? In the trap of these people and their sichilutam and their nonsense, right? But look what he says here. This is what the part of Rambam I want to bring you. You're losing people like flies. This is the part of Rambam I want to bring you. Yeah? This is the path of letzim. What are letzim? People make letzim, but people make fun of everything. A letz, right? Nothing. Let's by definition is no honor. They take the honor away from everything, right? That's the let's. They first start talking nonsense, right? As Shlomo says in Mishle, Kol Kesil, Berov Devarim. The voice of a Kesil, of a fool, is Berov Devarim, talking a lot of words. Sit and talk all day long. That's Kol Kesil. That's a voice of a fool. So, Divrei Hava, you start with speaking just stupidities. ומתוך כך, באים לספר בגנות הצדיקים. And from there, what happens? You start speaking derogatory about great people. ומתוך כך, and from there, יהיה להן הרגל לדבר בנביאים. Then you start making fun of Nevi'im, meaning the words of Torah. Right? You start mocking them. וייתן דופי בדבריהם. ומתוך כך, and from that, באים לדבר באלוקים. Now you start talking about Hashem, וכופרים בעיקר. Then you deny the existence of God. This is the Rambam snowball effect. He says you start sitting down talking nonsense. From there, you're going to go to making fun of the Chachamim and the righteous people. From there, you go start making fun of the Torah itself. And then from there, you go making fun and denying the existence of God. That's what Rambam says. Now, the question is the pele. Because I sat around, talked a little nonsense, kibitzed around with my buddies, right? All right, so I schmoozed for an hour, talking about silly things. I could better spend my time other ways, but no. Okay, we had a good time together. I'm going to be kofir by ikar because I did that. I'm going to deny the existence of God. What in the world is the connection? How does one lead to the other? Good question. So let me share with you maybe an approach to understand this Rambam. And maybe with this we can understand exactly why we learned from Miriam, even though it wasn't really Lashon Hara, and what really was the minute amount of chet that we had here. So I want to read you a little passage in Sefer Yetzirah. Right? So Sefer Yetzirah, we know is Miyuchas, it was to Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva is the one who put it, Sefer Yetzirah, together. And the root, the source of the ideas is really dates back to Avraham Avinu, Sefer Yetzirah. And he says like this. And he says, En betova. En betova. There is in tov, lemala me'oneg. In tova, in goodness, there's nothing greater than what? Oneg. What's oneg? Oneg is pleasure. Oneg Shabbat, oneg. En betova lemala me'oneg. In good, there is nothing greater than oneg. Ve'en bera, and there's nothing in evil, lemata min nega. Anything worse than a nega. Now, if you look at oneg and nega, they're the same letters, just backwards. Oneg, red, right to left is oneg. Red, left to right is nega, right? Oneg, nega. So Sefer Yetzirah is saying there is nothing greater than oneg, and there's nothing worse than nega. Now, leaving aside, there's nothing better than oneg than pleasure. Pleasure is good. We all like pleasure. So maybe I'll buy that one, right? Nothing better than pleasure, but nothing worse than nega. I mean, nega is not great. It's discomfort. It's a discoloration in the skin. You know, there's a lot worse diseases we can think of that is way worse than nega. What does it mean? There's nothing worse than nega. Nega is skin discoloration. I'm sure it's uncomfortable. If you have to be outside the camp for 2 weeks away from family, sometimes it's a blessing, sometimes it's not so good, depending on the situation, right? But there's worse things in the world that can happen than having a nega. So what does Sefer Yetzirah mean? There's nothing. Right, nega, obviously, nega comes from Lashon Hara. So Ben's already saying there's something going on here, right? Obviously,
it's the unsatisfaction of the person that is not happy with what he has, that's why I always looking something else.
Okay.
Maybe
So
it's a sign for others. You know, when somebody is nega, something wrong with him spiritually.
good, but the Sefer Yetzirah is saying something here. It's contrasting tov and ra, good and evil, and oneg and nega. And it's not a coincidence that the two are opposite words from each other, right? So what is he trying to say? So I think sometimes we have to go simple. To understand oneg, let's understand oneg for a second. There's nothing better than oneg. Let's look at the Mesilat Yesharim. Mesilat Yesharim is this first chapter, right? The beginning of Mesilat Yesharim. And Mesilat Yesharim is introduction. Shadam lo nibra ela lihitaneg al Hashem. A human being was only created for one purpose. The hitaneg, oneg al Hashem. What was a person created for? Oneg, pleasure. And what pleasure? Lihitaneg al Hashem. To receive the pleasure directly by being close to Hashem. V'lehanot miziv shechinato, and derive pleasure from His Shechina. Shezeu hatanug hamiti. This is the real pleasure. V'aidun hagadol mikol haidunim. Idun is also pleasure. The greatest pleasure, well, any pleasure in the world. Sheyecholim limatzeh. So somebody asks you a simple question in one word. Why were you created? Why was the world created? What answer? What's the answer? Oneg. Oneg. For pleasure. Right? It's no reason why, it's no coincidence. Why do human beings have a natural drive for pleasure? We like to enjoy ourselves. Because Hashem put it in us, because that's what we're created for. The problem is that we focus on finite pleasure instead of infinite pleasure. We get confused sometimes. Right? We lose sight of what the pleasure we're supposed to go after. But ultimately, we were created for one purpose. Oneg, pleasure. So en tova, that part of the Sefer Yetzirah, we got it. En tova demala me'oneg. There is no greater good. There's no greater tov for a person than oneg, because that's what he's created for. Oneg v'yitaneg al Hashem. So what's en vera lemata minega? So what is nothing worse than nega? So here, I'll read with you a passage in the Zohar. So the Zohar says like this. Zohar Bereshit. Daf Kavav Amud Bet. If you don't trust me, you can look it up yourself. And the Zohar says like this. He said, Oneg. This is the end of the paragraph. I just want to focus on the last line. The Jewish people is going to be Oneg. And what is Oneg? So comes the Zohar and says, Oneg is Rashi Tevot of 3 words. Ayin, Nun, Gimal represent 3 words. What are the 3 words? Da'ihu. V'nadhar yotzeh me'eden lehashkot et hagan. Pasuk in Bereshit that says, V'nahar yotzeh me'eden is a river that flows from Eden. Lehashkot, to give water, to irrigate, to give life, lagan, to the garden. So if you look at the words Oneg, Oneg Ayin is Eden, the Zohar says. Right? Nun, Nahar. Right? Gimal, Gan. You want to know what Oneg stands for? Eden, Nahar, Gan. This is what it says. Nahar is a river. So a river flows from Eden into the Gan that gives water, liquid life to the garden. That's what the Zohar says. That's Oneg. So let's analyze this passage for a second. So Zohar is defining to you what Oneg is. Right? A little clearer definition than what? Than the Mesilat Yesharim. And he's saying, what does it mean, V'nahar yotzeh me'eden lehashkot et hagan? So that describes in Bereshit. A river flows from Eden, lehashkot et hagan. So what's the Gan? The garden is the garden, the Gan Eden, right? Garden of Eden is the Gan. Right? That's where Hashem put Adam and Chava. And what was their job? Le'ovda ul shomra. Le'ovda, to work it, ul shomra, and to protect it. So Hashem put Adam and Chava in the garden, and he gave them a job to do. They have to work. Right? But the Midrash says, mitzvot taseh, leshomra, mitzvot lo taseh. Right? They were given mitzvot. Small mitzvah only then was, right? Eat. Mitzvot taseh, to eat from every tree in the garden. Mitzvot lo taseh, don't eat from the Etz Hadat. Right? But they were given a job. They have to protect it. You have to serve the garden. You have to work in the garden. Hashem gave us this world and we got to work in it. Right? Now, what's Eden? Eden is Ashoni Idun, is pleasure. Eden is not in this world. Eden is the place, the world of pleasure, the world to come. That's what I'm about. That's Eden. And there's a Nahar that flows from Eden that gives life to the garden. Right? So if you look at the chronology of the Pasuk, we have Eden, place of pleasure. From it flows life, right? Into the Gan that we're placed into working. So why am I working? In order to what? To get to Eden. Right? That's really what I'm doing. The Pasuk is describing. We're working in the Gan because the Gan is spread from where? From Eden, from the ultimate world of pleasure, the world of Olam Haba. That's simply just describing the pasuk. If you want to extend this pasuk in depth, that's Maaseh Merkava that nobody understands. And if we did, we're not allowed to talk about it publicly anyways, right? But it's just in pshat, just translating the words, right? A river flows from Eden, from the ultimate source. That's what gives life force to the world. So what gives life force to the world is the Olam Haba, the world of, why? Because here we're supposed to work, and through it, was zochet to that ultimate world of pleasure. Very simple. That's Oneg, right? What's Nega? If you look at Nega, it's backwards. It's Nahar. First is the river, right? Then the Gan, then the garden, and then Eden is last. So what does Nega mean? Nega means I have a river. Where the river comes from doesn't come from anywhere. There's ultimate, there's something giving force. The world just is. Something giving force to the world, right? There's a Nahar, there's a river that gives life, gives life and bounty and rain and energy to the world, right? Nahar, that's Nega, that's Nun for Nega. Into the Gan, into the garden. And everything that I work in this world is for what? It's for Eden, it's for my pleasure. So Nega, what's Nega doing is disconnecting the work in this world from Gan Eden. Right? Whatever I'm doing it for what? For my own pleasure. Right? There's Nahar, there's a flow that happens by itself. It's not flowing from anywhere. It just flows into the garden. So whatever work I do in the garden is for what? It's for Eden, for my own personal physical pleasure that exists in the garden. Right? So you're denying Eden. You're denying the existence of Eden, which means the world is not connected to anything higher. It's not flowing from Olam Haba. It's right. You're disconnecting it from the world. That's Nega. So Eden is right. Oneg is the ultimate pleasure. It's connected to Eden, connected to the world to come, connected to a purpose. Nega is the opposite, completely disconnected. It's all about here and my pleasure, my physical pleasure, finite pleasure that exists here. So there's nothing greater, the Zohar says, than the Sefer Yetzirah says than Oneg. And there's nothing worse, there's nothing more evil than Nega. Because they're completely two opposite viewpoints of the world. Right? That's what the Sefer Yetzirah is saying. That's what the understanding of the Zohar. Yeah? Oh, so the question is like this. What does this have to do with what we're talking about? So, if you're related to what we're talking about over here, and in the world of, so let's break down Eden, Nahar, and Gan, right? Now we described in the world of a world, but a human being is also made up of Eden, Nahar, and Gan. Just like the world is made up of Eden, that flows from Eden, flows a river, an energy force that feeds the Gan. Human beings are built that way also. What's the Eden in the human being? The machshava, the mind. The ability to think, connect to Hashem, to connect to Hashem's Torah, the ability to contemplate and reach and understand things which are beyond this world, really. That's what we're doing with our minds. That's machshava. Then there's the world of dibur, of speech, right? That's the nahar that flows what the thoughts, brings it down, right? And then there's the gan, the garden, which is the world we act in. That's maaseh, that's our actions. Right? There's two ways we can express our thoughts: through speech or through actions. Right? That's the Eden, right? Nahar and Gan that's found in every human being. Now, most of us, if you think about it, we think in words. When you have a comment, when you're thinking, what are you thinking? Thinking in words. You're having a conversation with yourself when you think. That's dibur. None of us really exist in the world of machshava. See, machshava is something that really can't be defined in words. Is an understanding of something so profound that really words can't articulate it. I'll give you an example. It says Moshe Rabbeinu was kvad peh ukvad lashon. Moshe Rabbeinu had difficulty. Was heavy to speak. Right? Kaved. Mazeh kaved, kvad peh ukvad lashon. His mouth was heavy. What does it mean his mouth was heavy? So as little kids, we always understood Midrash says he put coals in his mouth and he stuttered when he spoke. It's not what's happening here. Moshe didn't have to stutter. When you understand the world and the world of machshava and the world as it is, there are no words to describe it. And I'll give you a really simple, we gave this example once before, right? If I don't know you, Dr. Block, and you're going to describe yourself to me, you're going to tell me a bunch of words, right? You're going to tell me you're a doctor and you're a wonderful mind and a father and a grandfather and you help the community and you like to learn. Well, you describe you to me. After you give me a 20-minute description, you strung 100, 200, 500, 1,000 words together. Do I know you? Do I really know you? who you are, you can't define in words. Can't. There's an understanding of yourself that can't be put into words. So that's a little glimmer of what we call machshava. It's an understanding of something beyond words. Now, if you ever learn the Sefer Maharal, he talks in a circle. Why does Maharal talk in a circle? Because the idea can't be expressed in words. There are no words to really can describe that idea. He talks around it, and hopefully that you saw enough information that you can get to the idea yourself. Because the idea can't be expressed in words. Words are limiting. There's only a finite amount of words. Words can only describe so much. When you're trying to understand something beyond, there are no words. So most of us are not connected to the world of machshava. Our thought is in dibur, is speech. We live in the world of dibur, speech, right? We hope that when we speak, they're expressing some deeper ideas, right? But honestly, between 80-90% of our speech is basically nonsense, right? At the end of the day, it's banter, it's this, it's that. Okay, we talk about essential things. I gotta go to work, I gotta eat. But when we have conversations on a general basis, we banter, we joke around. It's those words, dibur, are not connected to any expression of machshava or real deep thought, right? They're the world of dibur, right? That's the reality. So, but that makes sense? That I expressed the idea? Right. So, Moshe Rabbeinu, right? He says, "B'chol beti ne'emanhu." We asked. That's what it says here. Before the pasuk describes that Moshe Rabbeinu's nevuah is different, it tells me, "B'chol beti ne'emanhu." B'chol beti ne'emanhu. How nobody else is ne'eman? Aharon is not ne'eman, right? Miriam is not ne'emanet. B'chol beti. That's what the pasuk says. Ne'emanhu. From all my house, he's ne'eman. The idea Moshe Rabbeinu expressed and only expressed the diburim of Hashem. That's his whole existence. He's ne'eman. Every word that comes out of his mouth is dibur Hashem. That's Moshe's greatness. And that's why he can't speak, because his words really are words of machshava. Those words can't, that language that can't be brought down to words. And it's kaved, it's heavy. You try to figure out how you can say those words because they can't really be expressed. You're looking to use fine language that can express those ideas, right? We'll get back to Miriam in a second, right? But that's what the pasuk is trying to describe. So with this introduction, maybe we can ascend the Rambam. We started with a question with the Rambam. Rambam says, you start sitting around a table schmoozing and talking nonsense. Nothing asur, nothing derogatory, nonsense. From there, you're going to move to derogatory against tzaddikim, against righteous people. From there, you're going to move to derogatory against nevi'im, nevuot, Torah, Tanakh. From there, you're going to move to be kofer ba'ikar, to deny Hashem's existence. And the question is, what in the world is the connection? See, the answer is, when we speak words of nonsense that have no meaning, the words are detached from the mind. They're just banter. It's just literally words that have no value. They're not expressing anything, right? So you're detached from the machshava. In our analogy, you're detached from what? From Eden. The worlds exist on their own, with no connection to something higher. They're just nonsense words. And those words start nonsense. And really, when the whole world just talks, and the words you use are not connected to anything meaningful, which is the majority of the words spoken today in the world. Not only are they not the word of meaning, they're all false. The world where every word is literally sheker. Actually, not only is it not meaningful, it's actually lies and deceit and garbage. Literally garbage. You literally can't turn on a radio, news, nothing without hearing stupidity. They just banter all day long about absolutely nothing. Theories are not based on anything and just analyzing things on stupidity and just cursing out and trashing everybody else. It's just literally, it's noise. That's dibur. When you have this constant dibur on a constant basis, detached from anything higher, what happens? Anybody who actually lives on a higher plane, you mock. Because, right? It just leads to what? You're disconnected from anything. Your words are disconnected from anything. So by definition, nothing's connected. So anything that's connected, you laugh at. You mock. You let. That's not a world you even can relate to. You don't live in that world. You don't understand it because you just live in a world that's detached from anything real. And from there, anything which is from there, if we start starting with the people, then you start first making fun of the people, then you jump to make fun of religion because religion is connected to something higher, and you live in a world of nonsense. So there's nothing higher. And then what's the next step? You deny God Himself. Rambam says that is the snowball effect. When dibur is havai, the rov diburim, just words that are disconnected from anything, by definition, you slowly will disconnect from everything. It's just an ahar that flows. It's the flowing ahar of, right? That's flowing into where? Into the Gan. And it leads to my own ultimate pleasure. Whatever I do is for my own ultimate pleasure. My own Eden. And you're disconnected from the real Eden. That's Nega. That's a world of Nega. So the root of Lashon Hara really is not even derogatory toward speech. It's speech disconnected from something real. That's the root of all Lashon Hara. Right? It's speech disconnected from anything real. Just nonsense talk. And that's Nega. And that creates a Nega. A Nega, by definition, is something that's disconnected from Eden. It's looking backwards. Right? So that's where you read the Rambam. Look at the words again. Rambam says, the Rambam is not using this language just randomly. Gedolot v'niflaot. What does it say about Hashem? Oseh gedolot aden cheker. Hashem makes gedolot aden cheker. Right? There's no end. V'niflaot aden mispar. Right? Gedolot aden cheker, we say is Maaseh Bereshit. We can create this great world. V'niflaot aden mispar. Wonders is Maaseh Merkava. That's the world. Hashem runs the world. Right? So when look at Hashem's gedolot and niflaot, in contrast to your nonsense, gedolot and niflaot, which are absolutely devoid of any meaning or substance. It's just nonsense. That's your gedolot and niflaot. He's mocking the Rambam, right? These are words that disconnected from anything. That's the start of the downfall, when our words have no meaning. So I want to finish with this Rambam over here. And therefore he says, רמב"ם הלכות דעות פרק שני, הלכה ד' לעולם ירבה אדם בשתיקה. A person should always be מרבה בשתיקה. Silence. ולא ידבר. A person should only speak. אלא בדבר חוכמה. Speak with wisdom. או בדברים שצריכים להן לחיי גופו. Or things people need to live, survive. Unfortunately, I have to say, pass me the food and pass me this and your business, the things which you need to survive. ואמרו על רב, תלמיד רבנו הקדוש, אצל about רב, שלא סך שיחה בטלה כל ימיו. Never in his life did he speak שיחה בטלה, words that had no meaning, no purpose. וזוהי שיחת רוב כל האדם. And unfortunately, this is the language of most people. 24/7 is שיחה בטלה. ואמרו, and that's why it says in Mishan Pirkei Avot, לא מצאתי לגוף טוב, אלא שתיקה. Silence. Why is that? Right? Because shtika, silence, is when it's chokhmah. לא מצאתי לגוף טוב, אלא שתיקה. Because when you're silent, then you can think. And actually the chokhmah can be processed. And then, right? Because real chokhmah actually is not found in words. Real chokhmah is found in word, in thought. Words are limiting. So a person who's really in the world of chokhmah doesn't need to speak. And if he speaks words of chokhmah that express it. The moment our language, the majority of our language is nonsense all day long, that's the beginning of everything. So the root of Lashon Hara is learned from where? From Miriam. She didn't speak anything derogatory. She didn't actually say Lashon Hara. But on some level, it was Divrei Havai. Because it was nonsense words. Why was it nonsense words? Because what she said was untrue, right? Hashem doesn't speak to us too. But there's a difference between you and Moshe Rabbeinu. That's what he says. B'chol beti ne'eman bu. Moshe Rabbeinu never in his life spoke a word that is not chokhmah, that doesn't come from emet, from truth. That's directly from me. And this word, Miriam, that you just said, is not ne'eman. It's not directly from me. Right? So in a sense, it wasn't anything wrong. Right? It wasn't gnai, it wasn't derogatory. It's actually giving a little tochacha to a younger brother, but it's a mistaken word. And on her level, that mistaken word is divrei havai, a word that is not connected to any wisdom. So the root of lashon hara is learned from here, because the root of all lashon hara, the problem is was divrei havai. That's where it starts. Words that have no substance. That's what we learn from there. Obviously, none of us are on this level, right? And halavai, we shouldn't speak lashon hara. Forget about divrei havai, right? Right? But conceptually, the reason why the world looks the way it looks today is because that's all you have 24/7. Literally, divrei havai. There is no word that is said in the world that is not nonsense. The news is nonsense, and people's talking 24/7. They're bombarded with stupidity, not connected to any chokhmah. It's just attacking each other and politics and ploys and this group against that group and shekarim. There's nothing truth can be found anyways. That's what it says. Bizman aden, you will not find truth in that world. Nowhere to be found. So if the only lesson we can get from here is to disengage from this nonsense. You know, I got how many posts and shares I got about on WhatsApp from different retorts to the Palestinians, and I'm going to say this and look at we're actually joining in their divrei havai. You know, it's irrelevant. Why am I getting involved in their stupidity? You know, Jews are this and Arabs are this. It's all nonsense. It's all nonsense. That's not the lesson of what's happening here in the world. We get caught up in the world and thinking that if I yell louder than the other guy, so then I'm going to be heard. Nobody's listening to you. Everybody made up their minds. You can talk till you're blue in the face. Nobody's believing you. Nobody's changing their mind because you said something or because you sent a sharp text against the other side. Nobody cares, right? Everybody's made up they're grounded in their positions. They're not changing, right? Maybe speak a little bit of chokhmah. Maybe take them to Israel, show them a kotel abaravi. Maybe that speaks 1,000 words. That you can do, right? The chokhmah you can share with them, but the joining in the banter, we gain absolutely nothing. The world is a world of sheker. That's divrei havai, and therefore no shock that first we mock religious leaders and everything is funny. Then we start mocking religion itself, and now the new thing, there's no God, right? That's the Rambam played out in front of our eyes, right? When we started all-day news organizations, I was thinking it was the downfall of America, right? Right there, 24/7, literally talking nonsense. At least they're shows, so they know they're nonsense, but at least you know they're not true. They're just shows. This is apparently news 24/7. Anytime you turn it on, people analyzing and talking nonsense 24/7. Divrei havai. And what happens when you talk divrei havai? Words disconnected from anything real. You start mocking Jews, and you mock this, and you mock religion, you mock great people. Anybody who's worth anything is laughed at. And from there, you mock religion, and from there, you mock God. Right? That's the Rambam. That's the world we live in. So Rambam's warning you. When you see such a world, it's time to pull away. Divrei havai. And that's the lesson of Miriam. And from her, we learn lashon hara, not from anybody else. And because that's the root of lashon hara. Good? All right.